Please note that coffee hour with cake is offered in the kitchen area today, and it will honor Judith Foster. So please enjoy that following worship. Dear God, we ask that as the Spirit hovered and overshadowed Mary, that in fact we might feel its presence here today. Amen. There's a scene in the movie Dead Man Walking, not a Christmas movie, that connects with the text this morning in a counterintuitive way. It occurs close to the end of the movie, just hours before Matthew, the inmate's execution. Susan Sarandon plays the part of the nun, Sister Helen Prigine, who has been visiting Matthew for the last 6 days of his life at his prison. The crime he's been accused of was the senseless murder of a young couple while they were parked in a car in the woods. And during Sister Helen's several visits, Matthew, who is played by Sean Penn, goes through stages of being either defensive or arrogant or surly or inappropriate. He does not admit his guilt readily. The legal authorities, the jailers, the parents of the victims have all deemed him an animal, a creature who deserves execution. But Susan Sarandon's character in the story, based on the real-life experience of Sister Helen, cares about something more. She cares about his spiritual life, his honest confession before God, the possibility that he might accept responsibility for his actions. And so in this scene, Sister Helen speaks to Matthew before the iron bars separating them. Faced with his imminent death, he finally breaks down and confesses the truth of what he has done. And in his own broken and inept way, he admits remorse, and his whole body shows it. In response, Sister Helen says, "You are a son of God, Matthew. Do you believe this?" And he cries some more and looks at her and nods sheepishly. And then he says through his tears, "I ain't never been no son of God before." And then they both weep. Now, the scene can maybe help us, I think, understand something about God's interaction with Mary. Give us some sense of God's interest in intervening into the ordinariness of life, into the lives of the lowest, the most common, and the least, into the lives of those too easily dismissed or forgotten. Matthew is regarded as beyond redemption, but through the efforts of a Catholic sister who herself had as yet no fame or notoriety, God breaks into his life and he hears a greeting, a declaration of acceptance minutes before his death. A greeting not totally unlike the greeting that Mary heard. She heard, "Greetings, favored one." He heard, "Matthew, you are a son of God." I mean, look, I'm trying to find a way here to peel away layers of piety that the church has covered Mary with for centuries. Think about it. In Renaissance paintings of the Annunciation, Mary is often portrayed as kind of a shy princess in modest night clothes, not a Palestinian peasant of the first century. Connecting her special moment to a modern movie about a misbegotten misfit can remind us that she was a poor, illiterate, unknown teenage girl from a town that was on the other side of the tracks. She probably didn't stand out in a crowd, just one of the everyday masses of humanity, hardly worth a greeting, hardly worth a title like Daughter of God. Just before the story of Gabriel's conversation with her, the focus is on the man named Zechariah and the birth of John the Baptist. That story takes place in Bethlehem, and Bethlehem is a respected city because of its association with King David, who lived 1,000 years before Mary. Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth have a distinguished ancestry, but Mary isn't from there. She's from a nothing town, Nazareth, a place with a sketchy reputation. It's like she's from Gresham at best. Maybe Myrtle Creek. She's this 13-year-old from an extremely poor family living in a neighborhood of single wides. It's just this Mary, though, who's greeted by an angel of God as full of grace, favored one. She's not described as extraordinarily holy. And look, the angel addresses her as favored one, not because she's in any way special, but because she has simply been chosen. John Calvin, who translated the Gospels, translated favored one as happy one who has received the undeserved love of God. Mary could be any one of, the Afghan children who are among the newest residents of this town. She could be any number of young people we see walking around downtown, struggling to survive another winter. And God breaks into her life. The tendency to think that leading unassuming lives in out-of-the-way places isolates us from the extraordinary is debunked by Mary's surprise visitor. It's kind of like those occasional television news broadcasts of unlikely youngsters in rural areas born into, dirt-poor families who, surprise, sometimes win statewide spelling bees. God breaks into the lives of those you'd least suspect. The story reminds us that God longs to break into the present moment, our present moment, in fact. The biblical interpreter, Catherine Huey, points out that this story of the angel's announcement to Mary isn't called a request, nor is it called the invitation. It's called the annunciation, the announcement. God has a desire to lift up the lowly, and so God gives an order to a heavenly messenger. In this case, his name is Gabriel. Come on, pages. And Gabriel announces the will of God. It's like a gentle flood of buoyant, warm water that suddenly fills the chamber where Mary is. It's unwelcome and scary, but it also comforting, and it lifts her like nothing ever has. And the announcement will echo and echo for millennia, redounding to generation after generation, all the way down to us and those who will come after us. The popularity of this story tells us that God intends to draw all of us, as well as Mary, into what God is busy with. God is apparently not willing to do this behind our backs, nor without our participation. And this is what makes Mary's story our own. It's what chimes for me as I think about Sister Helen Prigine ministering to what the world would call a worthless criminal. Mary asks a critical question after Gabriel speaks to her. She asks, "How can this be?" It's actually a rather pedestrian question. It's almost too common. But we've all asked this question out loud or silently to ourselves at various moments in our lives. We've asked it maybe in a doctor's office when we've gotten some bad news. How can this be? Or when someone we love has gotten bad news. Or when someone has called to tell us something we never imagined might happen. How can this be? Or maybe we've gotten some very good news. We've gotten a promotion or a job or a scholarship, or we've won some award. How can this be, we ask in a moment of wonder. Good news or bad news, it's like our lives take on a whole new dimension that we've never imagined before. It's like some agent of God has entered the room and whispered something we could never have been ready for, and it has, for us, cosmic significance. How in the world did this happen? Remember young Malala Yousafzai? She won the Nobel Prize. Sure wasn't something she sought any more than she wanted to be shot on her way to school one morning. But who would say she wasn't summoned in a cosmic way to bear something of God into the world? She's not a Christian, but she's definitely a devoted follower of God. She knew firsthand the injustices of not being allowed to go to school because she was a female growing up in Pakistan. Her life was threatened by religious fanatics, but she said yes to education anyway. And she paid the penultimate price. She didn't die. She was wounded, and she survived, like Mary, in order to deliver something. Not a baby, but a message about being a human being and having a right to have an education, to quench her inborn curiosity, to indulge her love of learning. As with Mary, what happened wasn't for her alone. No, it was to show the way to tens of thousands of other Pakistani girls who became inspired by her, and also now millions of other girls around the earth. It's a God thing, this Mary. It's a God thing, Malala, because the good they do echoes after them forever. We distance ourselves from Mary by making her holier than she is meant to be, and by forgetting that ordinariness. We distance ourselves from her by reading the story as though she had no choice about a response, as if she simply surrendered. Barbara Brown Taylor, a preacher I love to cite, says that yes, the angel announced the impending birth and didn't ask Mary for her assent, but asserts that there is a choice for Mary, and it is this: whether to take hold of the unknown life the angel held out to her, or whether to defend herself against it however she could. Malala had a similar choice, having been shot. Who would think ill of her if she chose to remain silent? Nobody. But the fire in her belly for education was matched by the fire in her heart to defy the forces of evil that were dead set against women bettering themselves. I imagine Mary had a similar fire burning inside her too. You hear it in the hymn she sings in response to the announcement that's not part of today's text. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. For God has looked with favor on my lowly state. God has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. We have a similar choice in our own lives to say yes or no. Yes, I will live this life that is being held out to me, or no, I will not. Yes, I will explore this new, unexpected turn of events brought to me by this post-COVID world, or retirement, or divorce, or no, I will not. We can say, shoot, I have a debilitating condition and I'm mad as heck about it. Or we can say, well, this handicap I now have closes off some stuff I used to love to do. I wonder what it might open up for me, though, if I look at it differently. We can say no to our life, and we can rest assured that no angels will trouble us ever again. But if we say yes to our lives, we might take part in a thrilling and dangerous scheme with no script and no guarantees. We can conspire with an angel as Mary does to smuggle God into the world inside our own bodies. Mary had the last word. Here I am, she said. Those are the words that Martin Luther said when he was put on trial for his life by the Holy Roman Emperor in 1521. Would he stand by his writings and his belief that the gospel was a gift of grace meant for every human being? Or would he recant and agree with the religious authorities of his day that the church, capital C, church, alone was solely in charge of mediating all God's power and love? Luther asked for 24 hours to think about his decision, and it was granted. The last thing he wanted was to be burned at the stake. The next day dawned. There he was, standing before the most powerful court in the world. Turns out his conscience wouldn't let him back down. Here I stand, he said. I can do no other. Here I am, said Mary. And the Word was made flesh. Ralph Waldo Emerson once put it this way. Remember this if you remember nothing else. He said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us. What lies within you that is stirring to life like that seed in Mary? Will you say yes to it? Amen.